The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, and help me welcome our candidate for county attorney.
Yes, good afternoon, Carl.
Okay,
Thank you for
John.
inviting me.
How are you doing today with your campaign?
Great. We're getting out there. I'm going to meeting with various law enforcement, police chiefs. Before the pandemic hit, I was speaking with police chiefs, defense lawyers. Of course, the pandemic hit, and that put an end to that. But I've renewed that. So I'm mostly out in the western part of the state. In fact, tomorrow I'm gonna meet with Chris Conley, who's running for sheriff, and him and I are going to meet with a number of police chiefs out in Greenfield. So we're gonna have some coffee and some bagels and talk about law and order and law enforcement.
Well, that's all you want. We're having you here to talk about law and order, right? You want to tell people about your perspective on what's needed in the county from terms of following the law.
Well, yes, that's I retired I was a judge.
Right.
I was in senior status up until January 6th of this year. I completed my last trial on the afternoon of January 6th, and I retired effective the next day, and I announced my candidacy for Hillsborough County Attorney on that day. And I was embarrassed by what was happening at the Hillsborough County Attorney's office. As you know, Dennis Hogan, who did a good job as our county attorney, he lost. The Democrat tide came in and swept him out. And the new person, the Democrat that was there, had no legal experience in the courtroom, had never run a law office before in terms of personnel, things like that. And it wasn't long before there was some issues, and it got so bad that the Attorney General's office asked him to resign.
Yeah.
And when he refused to resign his position, they came in and they have statutory authority to do it, and took over control of his office and remained there for about 9 months. They just left in June. So I have a serious concern about how he was running. There was a total lack of policies, procedures, communication, cooperation with local law enforcement, and I want to change that.
That's what I think you'll find, that a lot of Democrats aren't really ready for being elected to the legislature or some of the offices that they have. It's they just follow their instructions.
Well, I think it happens on both sides. I think the legislature has such a broad range of people that are in it. They bring in a wide variety of views and experiences, I think, which is healthy. Yeah. Which is healthy for a vibrant legislature. And I think that's why we have 400 of them. But the county attorney's office, the only real qualification that you have to meet the minimum standard is that you have to be a lawyer in New Hampshire, licensed in New Hampshire. And in fact, the incumbent was a lawyer, but he was on inactive status, which means he wasn't an active member of the bar, but he was a member of the bar. And obviously he had to change that. But so that's an issue. And then when he takes over the office, he didn't have experience with prosecution, no courtroom experience, and it showed. It's unfortunate. And I think it's the people of Hillsborough County that suffered. And I retired from the military as well, but I'm concerned about Hillsborough County's future. Yeah. We have 4 adult children, 3 of our adult children. They'll always be our children. Live in Hillsborough County. We have 2 grandchildren, age 5 and 22 months old, and they live in Merrimack. So I want them to grow up and continue to work here in Hillsborough County and have a safe environment. And we've seen what's been happening in the largest cities around the country, and even here in New Hampshire, there's been some issues.
Well, what do you think the people should know about this office and why you're running, but what facts are really key to your position?
Well, I think that people must understand that this is similar to being a district attorney.
Right.
We talk about county attorney because that's the term that they've used in our New Hampshire Constitution.
Yeah.
So constitutionally elected office, you're the chief law enforcement official of that county, which means you're responsible for all felony prosecutions, misdemeanor appeals from the district court. So it's a heavy burden. There's about 25 lawyers. I say 25 because I'm not sure the exact count because some lawyers come and go, and you have a full staff, and you have 2 offices. Hillsborough County is the only county in the state that's divided into 2 districts. We have the Northern District located in Manchester and the Southern District located in Nashville. So it's 2 offices.
And it's a hard thing to keep them all going. But I remember when I was in the legislature and happened to be on the executive council for the county, the offices will run pretty smoothly, from my recall, and things like the budget really came in nicely. We didn't have much of an argument.
And yes, I was the county attorney, and that's another story that we could talk about. But I of course you always are mindful of the budget.
Yeah.
But as we know, what's happened is that Felonies First came into New Hampshire, and Felonies First basically is, instead of cases going to the local district courts, felony cases. So assuming police, law enforcement has probable cause to make an arrest, they arrest an individual. That individual then is arraigned in the district court. Now, the district court does not have jurisdiction to determine guilt or innocence. District court had jurisdiction to determine whether or not there was probable cause. Did the defendant probably was a crime committed, and the defendant probably committed? Very low standard. And that worked, I think, for many, many, many years. And I, as a district court judge I sat on many probable cause hearings. And it was really a good tool. It was a good tool for defense lawyers because by that, it gave the defense lawyers an opportunity to speak with their clients, address issues of bail. It was also a good opportunity for the state between the time of the arrest, the arraignment, and the probable cause hearing to put together their police reports and get those reports ready to go to the defense lawyer, and then eventually ready to go to the county attorney's office. Because in New Hampshire, again, the only way a person could be, should we say, held accountable for a felony, charged, is by indictment by a grand jury. So the county attorney presents cases to the grand jury. The grand jury meets secretly and then returns an indictment or does not return an indictment on cases. So once Felonies First came in, it's almost like Monopoly. Do not pass go, to go directly, so it went directly to the Superior Court.
Okay.
And Dennis Hogan, who was the county attorney, my wife was the Register of Deeds at the time, and she would come home at the meetings to tell me, that Dennis asked for 5 more county attorneys. And he was predicting what was going to happen.
Right.
And he was like a cry in the wilderness.
Yep.
No one listened to him.
All right.
Oh, the budget, and I understand the budget, and I'm very fiscally conservative. But when you're throwing that many cases directly into the system, Dennis knew what was going to happen. And unfortunately, just as he predicted, it happened. Felonies First came in, and everything slowed right down.
Overload, yeah. So tell us more about the law that you want the voters to know about.
Well, there's also the bail reform too.
Right.
And the bail reform, basically, when I was in the district court, we would set bail, and usually it's you have to look at a couple bases for determination of bail. Is the person likely to appear? What are the community ties? Things like that. Is there a criminal record? Is he a danger to himself, to an individual, to the community at large? And when they did the bail reform, a lot of that changed. And now there have been some changes recently that have probably not taken effect. They were supposed to take effect within 60 days, I think, of the governor signing off on them. So there are some changes in the bail reform. But I think to a large part, it needs to be totally changed and looked at, because what happens is that people are arrested and they're released, but then they're rearrested and released, rearrested. When I was in Iraq a number of years ago, euphemistically we called it catch and release, but it was tough because we would catch the coalition would roll up some people and then they were being released.
So you think we might be in that situation here now, that we we'll be seeing people released that shouldn't be released?
Well, I think that's happening now. But when I was sitting as a judge in Manchester, the Manchester Police Department, for example, they have the city solicitor's office, which handles the prosecution. They also have an arm of the police department that does the arraignments, police officers. They would come in on a Sunday afternoon, and they would prepare motions to revoke bail. So if it meets certain criteria, even though if they've been rearrested, you're holding an arraignment, you could also have a hearing. I usually would wait until the next day, until counsel could be present, because they're certainly entitled to hearing, so I'd wait. But you could have a hearing on those motions to revoke bail. And if they met a certain criteria, you could revoke their bail and hold them without bail. And that's what Manchester Police, to their credit, was doing that. Chief Capano is a great chief up in Manchester. I don't know the chief here in Nashua. I met him once. I went to chat with him, but I really don't know him. But I know Chief Capano a little bit, and I like what I see. I mean, he's really a police officer's chief.
Okay,
chief.
Good. So you don't see any real problem, but what changes you're saying are needed?
Well, I think what happens is that what's happening in the Superior Court is they continue to release, and the county attorney's office needs to file those motions to revoke bail. If there's probable cause to believe a person committed a crime, state or federal, if they meet a certain criteria, certain burden of proof, then they should be held, because this is what happens, and they keep reoffending allegedly.
Does history play a part of that then? Their history play a part?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. If they have failures to appear, depending on the seriousness of the crimes, is it the same alleged victim as the victim that the alleged victim now as before was a victim? So those are all considerations for the court to make.
Okay. There was something in the newspaper recently about some of the lawyers that were in here defending the ones that couldn't afford it. Were getting lawyers that really didn't understand how to defend them in a situation like that. I saw
that on news, and I was in private practice. I did a large amount of my practice was defense work in the district court, and I did a lot of juvenile work representing juveniles.
That was the one thing that usually
in delinquency cases, CHINS cases, child in need of services, things like that.
Yeah,
so that bothered me too. That they. That the perception is that the lawyers aren't doing their jobs. Because I would say, and I was on the bench for about 15 years, that by far the lawyers that appeared before me anyway were well prepared. And that's whether or not they were public defenders or private lawyers or court-appointed counsel.
I see. It was the public defensive lawyers that came in and were especially not experienced, let's say, in handling the juvenile questions. That's what was brought up. And they felt that a lot of juveniles had some problem with that. Have you seen that at all?
Well, I didn't do juvenile. I did criminal cases, adult criminal, and then civil matters, things like that. So I think I did one case that was just very briefly.
Well, what else do you think that people should know about the situation in handling the law?
Well, one of the important things when I've been talking with police chiefs is the lack of communication and cooperation with law enforcement. And so I intend to improve that. And there really needs to be liaisons, people that are accountable to those departments as to what the status of their cases is. And they should know on a periodic basis what's going on with their cases. Too often have I heard from the local police chiefs is that they sent the case out to the county attorney's office and they don't hear anything. And then 4 or 5 months go by and they make an inquiry and, yes, we pled that out. Well, and even whether the department is small, large, or medium, the police chiefs have accountability to the local population. And the victims of crimes want to know what's going on with the cases, and they should have input into that. Not only should the victims have input into that, but also the police chiefs should have recommendations and input into what's going on into the process.
Well, communication is necessary in almost any kind of organization, and you have to make sure that all levels of the people that are involved know what's happening.
Well, absolutely. My experience, I was in the Marine Corps as a judge advocate. I was in National Guard Army Guard, and as well as the reserves. And I did 3 tours in Iraq. So I understand how systems work and where the organizations fit. And information is pulled up from a lower level to a higher to the higher level, and pulled down from the higher level down to the lower level. So that everyone literally and figuratively is on the same page. It's absolutely essential for the operation. So the other thing too is, because we have 2 different districts, plea agreements should be fairly consistent in one court as well as the other court. So there needs to be some, at least initially, some broad sentencing guidelines. And I think that's something that can be worked on through time. And all the participants should be able to have some input into that. Not just the lawyers, but I think defense lawyers should also have a say what's going on, at least have some input into it, as well as law enforcement. So we'll talk about those things, talk about those issues. For example, a simple possession of cocaine is a felony, a very small possession. But maybe the local police department wants to keep it at their level, because at that level they know the resources that are available in the town. They know the families. They know the community connections that are vital. And after the defendant is done with the court case, guess where they're going back? They're going back into that community. So law enforcement in that community knows that individual, knows the family, knows what resources are available to the family and to the individual. So I think that's an important part, and they should have some discretion in that.
Well, definitely. I think that's almost in any organization, whether it's something affiliated with the law or the operation of some kind of community activity. You have to have that communication between the people that are involved. Yeah. And if you want to look for improvements, if you don't want to look for improvements and you're going to have a dictator up on one area or another, that's not good for the whole system.
After I completed active duty in the Marine Corps, I came back and practiced law here in New Hampshire, Nashua, Hudson, and then to my house eventually in Mount Vernon for many years. And in 1999, I joined the New Hampshire Army National Guard, the 197th Field Artillery Brigade. I was the Brigade JAG. So when I joined in 99, I thought, well, maybe there'd be an ice, there'd be a flood, and they'd call out the Guard. Little did I know what was down the road. And in 2002, I ran for Hillsborough County Attorney. And I won. And I was there for about 11 months. And my unit got activated to go to Iraq. So I resigned. So in January 2004, I resigned. I went to Fort Drum with the 197th. And then in March, we found ourselves in Iraq.
Oh.
And
well, I'm glad you made it back.
Well, and then while I was in Iraq in 2004, Governor Benson had just lost the re-election. And I got an email from him asking if I was interested in a judicial position to be the presiding judge in Derry. So I emailed back. My unit made sure I got back for the public hearing. I got sworn in and then went back to Iraq and finished my tour with the 197th, came back and started to sit as a judge over in Derry in March of 2005.
So that was a good experience for...
Well, it was it was interesting. It was interesting. And then in 2007, I volunteered to go back. And this time I volunteered and I was with the Security Transition Command in Baghdad. And that was during the surge. So just think of a bullseye and the bullseye on a dartboard. We were the bullseye with a lot of indirect fire, rockets, mortars. And General Petraeus, he had literally invented the book on what they call COIN, that's the acronym, counterinsurgency. And that's what he did because the war was sort of dragging on and he was the force behind that to turn things around. And I worked with the Iraqi government. I worked with the General Counsel's Office for the Ministry of Defense to help establish and rebuild the military courts. And I was one of the many judge advocates. There was one before me. There was one after me. But we were able to, and I was able to see the first post-Saddam military court-martial. And they do things a little differently there. It's sort of based after the French system. But they passed rules and procedures like our UCMJ, and we were instrumental in helping to create the court, making sure that we built an appeals court. They had a trial court. We furnished it. We got judges appointed. We got legal advisors, their JAG equivalents. we had a course for them, so we got them up to speed on their new law.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of, and some of the things they do, instead of having a single judge, they have a 3-judge panel.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then the senior judge, it was a 1-star general, he asks all the questions. So if you're the defense lawyer, you have to ask the judge to ask a question. And if he wants to let you ask a question, or he'll ask it. And the defendant does not sit next to his counsel. Defendant, it's like a huge
box?
crib, like a jail that they have in the courtroom. And they stand inside that area. And the witness stand is, in fact, a witness stand. They stand. And above the judges, above the raised platform of the judges, there's 3 passages of the Quran. So imagine if we had passages of the 10 Commandments, but it's an Islamic state. That's their national religion, and they take it very seriously.
Did you find any real differences that bothered you in that?
Well, again, it's an Islamic state.
Right.
So when they were passing the policies, procedures, they created the military structure for the courts. They had penalties. For example, homosexuality is punishable by death. Cowardice is punishable by death. So it's certainly different than our UCMJ.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So they have very harsh punishments.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've really experienced a lot of different things, and setting it up and making it work.
Well, that was the fun part too, to be able to use my judicial experience to help create and help them establish the rule of law. That's what it's all about. And it wasn't going to be our rule of law. It was going to be their rule of law that works for them.
But you had the key elements there that you
due process
talked about.
Defense, right to counsel. Right. Absolutely.
And so they really picked up on it, and they put together something that is it operating well today? Do you know?
I haven't heard. But we are still there.
Yeah.
And they still have an Iraqi army. So I've lost contacts with the people that I was there with.
But you all this experience, and you have many years under different conditions, under different operations, really, and that's all that helps your background in going into a system now that needs a little bit of organization.
What was good about that was helping create the rule of law. In my last tour that I did, I volunteered to go back 2010 and 11, this time with the 4th Infantry Division, and we were in northern Iraq outside of Tikrit, and I was the chief of administrative law, so all administrative actions north of Baghdad, they were my responsibility. We had, of course, some lawyers, and so we were the division headquarters, and we were commanded by General David Perkins, who was, I think, born in Goffstown, and he lived in Keene, and he became a 4-star general, and now is retired up north, and he was something special, and so. We had 3 brigades under us. So those were our, if you want to use the term, subordinate units. They were the subordinate units. So very interesting in terms of, and how many actions involved, they call it 15-6. It's an Army regulation for an investigation. So, and the reason they do the investigation, not only to find out what happened, but to find out how do we fix it. What went well, what went wrong, and how do we fix it. So that's a very important part. And we would provide advice to the investigating officer. And part of our duties and job was to review those cases and then provide a review for our boss, the staff judge advocate, who would then provide that information to the commanding general. And people talk about lawyers. So there's lawyers in war?
Yeah, right.
Well, you'd be surprised because the law of armed conflict, LOAC, is the acronym, is a big part of operational law and what JAGs do, judge advocates do. And it's an important part because we provide advice to commanders, we provide guidance, and it's absolutely essential because we're the good guys and we got to do things right. So there's a whole host of lawyers that accompany active duty infantry troops or any types of military movements and troops. There's judge advocates there.
And that has to work smoothly too.
It has to work, yes. That's why we're embedded in there.
Yeah.
And the 4th Infantry Division did it right because they brought a lot of JAGs. Like I was what they called an augmentee. I was an addition to. So based upon they put out the opening, they look at your qualifications, and then they say, okay, yes, we want you to. So they select you, and then you go.
So all this any kind of unknown things that you might run into when elected you're really prepared to handle
Well, you
it.
could. Any success that I've had, I think most people would say this. Any success that they've had or I've had, it really isn't about me. It's about the people that you have around you.
But you're a team player.
Right, the people that you work with and for. One thing I really enjoyed about being on active duty as a judge advocate is being able to work collegially. As a judge, you make these independent decisions all the time.
Yeah.
But as a judge advocate, as a lawyer, we could talk about issues like we're talking about now. What do you think about this?
Yeah.
Or if I had an issue with if I had a problem, I'd provide information or my or what I was doing, and I would talk to a captain, a young captain. I was lieutenant colonel. What do you think about this? Can you review this?
Yeah.
And I would do the same with him. They were bright people, and it was fun to be around other lawyers. And so it was that not give and take, but it was that collegial socializing attitude that you could talk about issues, work out issues.
And that helps you clarify the situation, I think, in your mind when you're talking about anything, whether it's making a law or deciding on what the law should really mean.
Right. And I think that's another thing, too, that I think I'd bring to the table is that if we don't like the bail reform, if we don't, well, we can do something about that. We can go to the legislature. We, meaning I can. And I can ask a state senator or a House member, say, why don't we have some legislation? Why don't we look at this, put it in a committee, and get some folks together and let's testify. And because we need to change this. And I think that's an important part of what we do.
Oh, it is. I know the legislature doesn't always hear about these things. Sometimes they're boxed out, and you like to make sure that they have everything that they need, all the information they need to make a just decision. It's, well, it sounds like you're going to have an interesting time. I hope your campaigning is working out well for you.
Well, thank you. And I have my campaign website is John Coughlin 2020.com.
Okay, and do you have enough people helping you?
I can always use more. If you want to go on the website, and there's you can go and you could click on and have some direct contact with the campaign. If you want a yard sign or whatever, that'd be great.
And want to donate to you, and if you have some questions, they get in touch with you.
If they have questions, I'd be glad to get back in touch with you.
I'm sure you will. And good luck.
Well, thank you, Kyle.
And we'll have you back when you're elected.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.